Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Captain Kelly J. Gordon, welcome to the conversation today.
Awesome. Thank you for having me here. So glad to be here.
It is a real pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Antigua. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about leadership, team dynamics, and we're going to do it from a little bit of a unique angle and perspective. You are a super yacht captain, and you're going to share all about unique challenges that you face in that kind of a setting and a context, and how it relates to other leadership experiences that you've had and that we see in organizations all the time. As we get started, I wanted to share Kelly's bio with everybody. Captain Kelly J. Gordon is an accomplished motor yacht captain, public speaker, social media influencer, and the 2022 recipient of a Crew Yachting's Master 500 DT Award. The former chemistry professor grew up on a farm in a small town in Indiana, where she developed the work ethic and drive that have made her successful. Her thirst for adventure has led her to become one of the busiest and most respected captains. Love it. Love the background. Anything you'd like to highlight before we dive on in?
No, I'm ready to roll.
Okay, cool. Well, so why don't you set the stage for us a little bit, just in terms of yachting and like how you got into this, and then we can start to kind of dig into your unique perspective.
Well, it's funny that you say you're up there in Salt Lake. You said Salt Lake City. It's a little bit chillier than where I am down here in the Caribbean in Antigua at the moment. But I'm actually from the Midwest originally, so North Central Indiana. So it's pretty chilly up there too. Completely landlocked. So the fact that I'm now a super yacht captain is like so far from anything that I could have imagined growing up. And it was really totally by accident and coincidence that I became a yacht captain. And that was because I chose to go to grad school. So I went to undergrad in Indiana, and then I went to grad school out in North Carolina, and really had no idea just how close to the coast I was. And then upon graduation, I still wanted to stay in academia. So I took a teaching job at a local college, and a student of mine was really involved in the town, and she saw that I was new to the town, and she's like, I really would like to show you around. And I'm like, okay, after grades are turned in, that works for me. She was a non-traditional student, so she was a little bit older than me. So, the friendship worked. And the first place that she took me to, in what was this very integral seaside town to the yachting community that I had no idea of, the first thing she took me to was an event on a yacht. And literally, I'll never forget the moment that I stepped one foot on the back deck, and I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And which is absolutely crazy, because I didn't know bow from stern or port from starboard. Like I knew nothing, but I said, this is what I want to do. And so fast forward almost 20 years later, here I am. So it's like, I chuckle to myself when you say you're up north in Salt Lake City, and, I'm from the Midwest as well. And it's just like, I'm so far from, and I'm sitting in a hotel room at the Antigua Charter Show, looking out my window at some of the largest super yachts, mega yachts in the world. And it's just literally, as we have this conversation, and I'm imagining you sitting back in Salt Lake and where I come from. So it's crazy how, the world turns.
It is, how we find ourselves where we find ourselves is always an interesting story in and of itself. It's always an interesting path, and most people don't tend to take a direct route. We tend to zigzag a little bit to kind of get where we're
Mm-hmm.
going. I always say, that's certainly the case for me. I always say, though, the exception, and I don't know many people like this, but someone like my wife, who knew from high school that she wanted to teach math, and that's what she's done her whole career. That's super rare. Most people don't like figure things out that quickly, and you have to like kind of meander and figure out what you want to do and what you're good at and where your passions lie. And that's really cool that you found your passion, that you've been able to live it all this time.
But you know what? I was one of those people, like your wife, where I knew from the time that I was 6 years old, little bitty, what I wanted to do, and it was to be a veterinarian. And I actually got into veterinary school right out of undergrad and dropped out for a lot of reasons. I was young, I was 22. My boyfriend and I had broken up. I was just kind of struggling on the mental health aspect of it. And I was scared to death of it, couldn't totally afford veterinary school. So it's like to go from being one of those people that knew my whole entire life what I wanted to be like, and the little town that I grew up in, like even had planned for me to take over the local veterinary clinic when, the
Oh,
veterinarian that had been there for years and years. So then I, do a complete, 180, like more than a 180 because yachting is so far from veterinary medicine, which is so far from, the chemistry degree that I wound up getting. So it's crazy how you get where you get.
it is. Well, very cool. I also have to say, I personally have no experience on super yachts or mega yachts. But I was in Venice with my wife and my oldest or my middle two daughters
Hmm.
this last summer, and we're just there in the square area in Venice for anyone who's been there. And you can look out and you can see, there's people in little boats and moving around and everything. And then there's like
Hmm.
this giant mega yacht. And I think it was really only a few weeks before the big Bezos thing in in Venice that caught all the attention, for his wedding.
Yeah.
But there's this other huge mega yacht, and it was our turn to go out on a little boat to get a little tour, and we're asking the guide, about it. And they didn't know a lot, but we were able to look up the yacht and we were able to look up the owner and all of that. And I'm just like, oh, this is a different world, isn't it? Like the size of this thing. And for this particular super yacht, it was the smaller of the two that this billionaire guy owned.
Hmm.
And
And
I
I'm
was like,
sure
okay.
small was huge.
It's a different world, and I don't like navigate that world. But that's really cool that I bet you have so many stories and so many different
Oh
things
my God.
to share about captaining,
So many.
ships like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it is absolutely a different world, and you talk about, leadership and what life is like on board, and I say that imagine, well, first of all, the yacht itself is like a floating city on water,
Hmm.
so it's like you take this thing that is living, breathing. It's almost like taking your house and
Right.
plopping it into salt water and plugging it into an extension cord and expecting it to run flawlessly. So right there, that
And
in
you're saying it
itself
doesn't
is
usually work that way?
no, it does not. It does not. You put the boat to bed at night and then you come back the next morning and you're like, stuff is broken. How did this happen? Like we didn't even go anywhere. So yeah, and then, being if you think about it, right, like right now we're a crew of I have a total of 14, and you live together, work together, play together, eat together, share a room together. Like you are, it's not a 9 to 5, where if you have a coworker that you don't really care for, you don't really like, at least at the end of the day, 5 o'clock comes, the bell dings, you get to go home and you get some sort of a reprieve. In this industry, there's a really good chance that if there's somebody on your crew that you're not getting along with, they might actually be your roommate. And your room is on these things is usually so small that like the both of you can't stand up and get dressed at the same time. Like so you know, there's so much going on in terms of, and then, it's not like you're working in a corporate situation and where probably most of you are all very similar in upbringing and nationality. Like on my boat, what is it? We're American, Russian, Venezuelan, Cuban, Bahamian, Brazilian. So you put all of those different personalities, all those different backgrounds, all those different upbringings, and I say it's like putting us in a pressure cooker. And so it's a lot of work to get that to run smoothly.
Yeah, interesting. And in any kind of, let's just use a typical corporate environment, you're kind of referring to that as a juxtaposition, but in any kind of typical organizational setting, having a successful team is already hard to do, for a variety of reasons. People have
Yes.
different backgrounds, as you said. People, have different mindsets. People have different skill sets, and it's one of the real skills of a really great leader when they can navigate and facilitate a team of
Hmm.
people with all these differences, to work together, to accomplish something greater, than individual parts. And it's hard. That's hard to do in a kind of a traditional setting, like you said, where you have maybe an office, you have time off on the weekends and at nights. You if there's someone you just can't stand, you can get away from them, for a bit.
You'll go
And
home at the end of the day. You know
exactly,
that you only have to hang in there until 5 o'clock.
yeah,
Here, that's
and
not the case.
yeah, and
When five
so.
o'clock comes, then you go down to have dinner with them, and then you go to bed with them, and it's yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm wondering, what it's been like, kind of learning to navigate that unique context for fostering, healthy team dynamics. Because what you're describing is quite a bit different than I think what most people probably have ever experienced themselves. And I figure if you can learn how to have a really great, dynamic, cooperative, supportive team in that kind of a pressure cooker situation, then you probably can do
Hmm.
it just about anywhere, I would suspect.
Well, thank you for saying that. And it was I actually just got a message from the boss man the other day, the boat owner, and we've got multiple boats. And he said, "Thanks, Kelly. You're really good at putting good teams together."
Mm,
And like just that one sentence text message that I got from him, I just hung on to for so long, and it put the biggest smile on my face. And I have a lot of conversations about it because leadership is just something that like I just love. Like I grew up loving learning the way people think. Why do they react this way? Why do they respond that way? What makes them feel this way? It's just something that I was naturally inquisitive about from like third grade. I remember asking in third grade at Christmas for my first interpersonal communications book just because I was so interested in the mind. And
interesting.
I think that in itself is my natural inquisitiveness is what has helped me be a good leader. I'm certainly not the best out there, and I've certainly got a lot more to learn. But I think, when I look at my crew and the dynamics and the fact that I've had some of my crew that have been with me for years
Mm,
and go from boat to boat to boat with me, um, it's I think the trick, at least this is what has worked for me, is to be authentic and to be genuine. And I'm 100% myself every day, all day. So if I'm happy, you know it. If I'm sad, you know it. If I'm frustrated, if I'm stressing, and I am very unapologetically myself all of the time. And I think allowing them to see me, who's supposed to be the captain of this big boat, who's supposed to be the leader, who's supposed to have it all figured out. I think for them to see me be a real human and for me to let them know maybe when I'm having a tough time or even when, maybe there's a recent achievement come along and I'm celebrating it or I need their help. So just letting them see that I'm human too has really allowed for a closeness with each and every one of them. Very different closenesses with each of them because they're all individuals. Um, I think that's what I think that's the trick. I think that's the ticket. Is it? And I say it's the simplest, hardest thing to do. To be authentic, to be your real self is so simple, but it's so hard because I don't think a lot of people, um, maybe not a lot, but you definitely have to put the time in to become confident, to become comfortable within yourself, to have that emotional IQ. And I've put, I could geek out on leadership. I love to read about it. I love to watch videos about it. I love to try new things, and I even tell my crew, well, I tried that and that didn't go over very well. That didn't work, or I'll tell them, oh, guys, I messed that one up. And they'll be like, that's all right, Cap, you'll get it next time. Um,
yeah,
but I think
people
I
people
just
tend to
think
be
that's the trick.
pretty willing to be patient and forgiving when they see the person in front of them is vulnerable and authentic and is trying, right? And
Yes.
I think that's why it is so hard. You know, I think you're absolutely right. What everything you just said is not rocket science. It's not like, I mean, it's been said a million times. There's millions of books
It's
and videos.
simple.
You know, like people talk about it all the time. And I think
Mhm,
conceptually, most people who are leaders know exactly what you just said. The problem is
mhm.
it's really hard to live. It's really hard to do
It
because
is.
you have to be intentional. You have to be vulnerable, and that's scary. And there's, you know, we have all these built up kind of pictures of a good leader in our heads, and most of those and how they've been portrayed in media, and you know, we grow up thinking about this strong stoic leader who always has it figured out, who knows what to do, who
Yeah.
people can lean on. And yes, there's a time and a place to provide stability, right? But there's also a time and a place
Right.
where, you know, you don't know everything. You don't have all the expertise. You have people on your crew
No.
that have very specific expertise in all these
Mhm.
different areas, and you lean on them and rely on them. And you don't need to try to pretend like you know everything. And in fact, when you do, it usually just erodes trust, and it usually just makes people feel micromanaged. And so
Mhm.
having like the self-confidence and the maturity and the internal kind of stability to be able to then foster that kind of authentic vulnerability. I think
It
it's a
takes a
real
lot of work, though.
it takes a lot of work, and it's a superpower that people can develop. I really do believe it, but it takes a lot of time and effort and self-reflection and like all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't just happen overnight for folks. But when you figure that out,
I spent years in therapy. I told you I dropped out of veterinary school, which was my lifelong dream. And I realized at one point when, I didn't want to be upright on this side of the planet anymore. I was like, okay, you got to do some work. And I dug in, I mean, deep, and went to therapy and read books and did workshops and did self-help. And like I did a lot of work, and I still do the work in a different way now, um, in the form of studying. Like I said, I'm always reading something, always watching something, and just what I'll learn from talking to you is just so much. And it's a lot of work, though. And I will say that, I say I do a lot of speaking around the world, and people talk about it, and I say, I said 10% of my job is driving the boat. The other 90% is peopling. And I'm like, I people all day long. And peopling is, when you really care, is a lot harder than driving a $30 million boat.
yeah, yeah. And to tie this into probably the types of leadership experiences that most in the audience have had, you know, I would actually say the same thing. So being a supervisor, manager, or leader in just about any context, it's more about peopling. It's more about the team. It's
Mhm.
more about the dynamics. It's more about the culture you and the example you set and the culture you build. And all of that is the people stuff. So regardless of, you know, kind of the technical area you might be in with your team. In your case, you know, it's a mega yacht, and it's like this floating city and all
Yeah.
these specific areas of specialty. Everyone though has kind of their own specific areas of specialty and on their teams that they're managing, and to help steer the ship of the organization and to help, you know, provide value and blah blah blah. Like all of that, I think every team has some of those dynamics. And I think the leaders, despite whatever good intentions they may have, I think the leaders who struggle are the ones that don't understand the people side of what they do is pretty much what they do. Like once you're in that role, you're
Mhm.
no longer the individual contributor. You're no longer the specialist or the subject matter expert in that thing. You can still bring some of that, of course, to what you do with the team, but like now you have other people to do that for you. So now it's all about finessing the dynamic, creating the culture, building trust and sustaining trust. And the things you mentioned about empathy and vulnerability and sharing and your genuine authentic self with others around you, that is the emotional energy that goes into leadership. And we've all had bad leaders. And usually I mean, sometimes bad leaders don't have technical or competency either, but typically, like the biggest problem with bad leaders is not that they lack technical skill and competency. It's usually that they lack the people stuff, right? And then you find
Oh,
yourself,
100%.
yeah. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's just a really important point I want to reiterate, because what you said within the yachting environment and captaining a ship, I think that applies to just about everyone in any kind of leadership environment they might find themselves. That it's about the people. And if you find yourself, focusing on all the technical aspects of it, chances are you're probably micromanaging more than you should.
Oh, yeah.
And you
Yeah.
need to learn to rely on, empower, and trust your team, and then you need to finesse and facilitate that dynamic that you want.
Well, and a couple things. I'll never forget this very specific instance when I had a young crew member that had risen to the chief stew position just kind of by out of default because I didn't have anybody else. She was next in line.
Hmm.
And I remember one day very specifically, I was going to bring on a second stew that had tons of experience. And I was so excited. And I was like, oh my God, you're going to love her. I'm like, she's got a lot of experience. Well, that very much intimidated her. And she said to me, I want to be the smartest person in the room. And I said, no, you don't ever want to be the smartest person in the room. And I said, if I'm ever the smartest person in the room, I want out of that room.
I
I
mean, you
said,
didn't do your
because
job.
you don't, yeah, you don't grow. And I said, you know, and that goes with everybody on the boat. My engineer, he's got a very, technical level of expertise. He could take the engines apart and put them back together again. I couldn't. And the ladies that run the interior and the level of service and their knowledge of textiles and in liquors and wines is just out of this world. And the guy is outside on the deck and everything that they know, like I go to them and say, hey, what do you think about this? Hey, what do you think about that? And I was mentoring a young captain the other day, and I said, look, you've got your deck, you've got you got exterior, you got interior, you got your engineer. And he goes, well, what am I here for then? And I said, you're here to make sure they have what they need to do their job.
Yeah.
And I don't think he understood that at his level it's not to do their job for them. And I found that he kind of kept getting enmeshed a little too much in what the engineer was doing and what the girls were doing, inside with the liquors and the wines. And I'm like, you have to step back and you have to let them do the job. I said, because their specialty is what they were hired for. Your specialty is the very small portion of your technical aspect is weather and navigation and boat handling. I said the rest of your job, which is such a small portion, the rest of your job is to lead. And to lead is to make sure that they have everything that they need physically, emotionally, intellectually to do the job. And I think a lot of leaders don't, they want to do, like you're saying, that micromanaging, and they don't want to ask the questions, and they don't realize really what their job is to hire people smarter than them. And
Amen. Amen to that. Yeah, and it
yes,
doesn't necessarily come from a bad place. And that's something I do want to reiterate is, you know,
it doesn't.
like there are jerk bosses who are just jerks and they are controlling and they're a pain to be around. But I think the vast majority of people who kind of get sucked into kind of the micromanaging aspect, I think it usually comes from a place of they want to help, they want to be supportive, and they don't
Hmm.
realize what
Hmm.
they're actually doing is undermining their people, and they're actually taking away autonomy, and they're actually eroding trust, and they're actually making things harder. I think the intention's probably good, but they're sabotaging themselves when they do that. And so, we can give grace to folks who are learning
Have a lead.
how to micromanage less, how to empower
Yeah.
more. So we definitely should be patient and give grace to folks to do that. But for anyone in the audience, like that's one of our jobs as leaders is to like learn that skill, like learn how to figure that out so we can balance the supportive aspect of being a leader with the autonomy side of being a leader. You don't want to undermanage, but you don't want to overmanage, and it can be a fine
And
line to
it's a
balance.
fine line.
Yeah.
It's a dance. It's a dance. It's a fine line every day, all day. And then I look back and I reflect and I'm like, well, maybe I should have offered more support there, or maybe I was too much there. But I'm always thinking about it, and I agree with you. You have to, I don't think, yeah, there's jerk bosses, but somebody that maybe isn't getting it quite right isn't doing this maliciously. And I use this, when I'm talking, especially to the industry and to other captains, and I say, you know, 90% of our training only pertains to 10% of our job. So we spend years training, taking courses on weather, navigation, boat handling, that kind of thing. And if I say 10% of our training is on leadership, that's probably even a stretch. So little of our training is on leadership. And honestly, we take one 5-day course that's supposed to be on the human element and leadership, and we're supposed to be leaders. So I give grace, but this isn't just in the yachting industry. This is, and you think of other, CEOs and president of this and vice president of that, or general manager. They they get to those positions because they're good at their craft. So they
Yeah.
rise to the top being good at their craft, and nobody, and then the leadership is just something that leading a team comes along by default, but nobody ever teaches them how to lead. And so I give grace to them, like you're saying. And but that's also, when I talk about this, I'm like, even if your industry doesn't provide formal leadership training, I'm like, take it upon yourself. That's why I'm always, even if I spend 5 minutes a day reading an article or googling a topic on maybe something particular that's going on within in the team, and for suggestions on how to handle it, or why maybe did someone take it this way, or gosh, for me, I've got, what did I say, 5 or 6 different nationalities on my boat, trying to teach myself about the different cultures so that I can understand them
Yeah.
a little bit better. There's really so much. I mean, with the internet and with books, and we're in an information age where you can learn really about anything.
Yeah, go to YouTube University and continue to learn.
Right.
Well, Kelly, this
Yeah.
has just been a fantastic conversation. I know at the time I need to let you go and get on with your busy day, but before we wrap things up, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, and then give us the final word for today.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Well, if you want to find me, you can find me on all socials, but probably the easiest way to get to me is to go to my website, which is captainkellejgordon.com. And there you can find all of my LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, all of the different ways, and even email me from there. And, if I was just to leave you with one bit of last insight, it would just be you, be unapologetically you, and lead and be with authenticity. And I think that will go so far.
I agree. Amen. I think that will get you a long, long way into finding success in whatever leadership role you find yourself. Kelly, it has been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Kelly can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe. And you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great
Yeah.
week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.